You wake up under the stars. The first thing you see is a flashing light blasting from an unnatural object far off in the solar system. Your eye turns to a crackling fire. You are a young Hearthian, a newly spacefaring species that lives on the teeny-tiny planet of Timberhearth, and today is your first foray into outer space as a new member of the Outer Wilds Ventures space program. You say goodbye to your friends and stop by the Hearthian Museum on your way to your ship to pick up the launch codes and a newly developed gadget. When Hearthians first started exploring the system, they came upon the remnants of a species long since missing from the area, the Nomai. All that remains of these enigmatic beings are ruined buildings, a little salvageable technology, and a few lonely skeletons. But among the ruins are Nomai writings, which you are now equipped to translate. You won't be the only Hearthian in space. Several travellers are in the midst of their own explorations. Chert on the Hourglass Twins, Rybeck on Brittle Hollow, and Gabbro on Giant's Deep. But no one has heard from Feldspar in a very long time. Each traveller has their own instrument, with which they keep in contact with home. Esker on the Attlerock, Timberhearth's moon, is always keeping an ear out for the familiar sound of the traveller's music, and with your signal scope, so can you. As you exit the museum ready to make your mark on the universe, the newly acquired Nomai statue in the entryway opens its eyes and looks at you. You hop inside your ship, pull on your spacesuit, and take off into the great unknown. While you're still getting to grips with navigating the solar system and beginning your explorations, the sun goes supernova and you die. With a gasping breath, you awaken by your campfire, 22 minutes in the past, which is now the present, but retaining the memories of everything you've seen. It quickly becomes clear you were the only one on Timberhearth experiencing this loop, and your goal has shifted. Now you must find out what's causing the sun to supernova, and stop it. You travel from planet to planet, meeting fellow travellers, including Gabbro, who, having just discovered another Nomai statue on Giant's Deep, is also experiencing the post-death time loop. You learn about Nomai history and culture, how the planets and stellar phenomena shift and change over your precious 22-minute window, and you die. Over and over again, sometimes to the supernova, often to your own newfound lackadaisical attitude towards risk. Eventually, you piece together what happened to the system's previous inhabitants. A couple of 100,000 years ago, the Nomai, a nomadic spacefaring species who traversed space in large ships called vessels, detected a signal that appeared to be older than the universe itself. They called it the Eye of the Universe, due to the signal's appearance resembling an eye, and followed its course here, to the Hearthian system. At some point, the eye's signal stopped or became distorted, and the Nomai vessel crashed in dark bramble, an invasive plant that distorts space and contains vast multitudes and very, very scary giant anglerfish. There used to be a fifth planet where dark bramble now resides, and one of its seeds has spread to Timberhearth, amongst other places, which would be a bigger concern if the system wasn't about to blow up anyway. The Nomai never completely understood why they ended up warping to dark bramble. Possibly the spatial distortions caused them to follow an echo of the original signal. Regardless, the Nomai were forced to evacuate on 3 escape shuttles, 2 escaping to Brittle Hollow and Ember Twin, the last getting caught in dark bramble, and forcing those survivors to attempt to return to the damaged vessel. Unfortunately, the spatial distortions on dark bramble caused them to follow an echo of the vessel's signal, and they never made it back. The survivors on Brittle Hollow and Ember Twin built grand settlements, featuring almost religious monuments to the Eye of the Universe, and vast spaces dedicated to scientific exploration and study. Eventually, the two surviving groups reconnected, probably after building gravity cannons which are able to fire Nomai shuttles off-planet at great speed. The Nomai identified a strange moon which appears to be in a state of quantum superposition, orbiting several astral bodies at once until observed, where it settles on one location. They called this the Wandering Moon, or Quantum Moon. They also discovered shards of rock on virtually every planet in the system that exhibit the same strange quantum behaviour. They can also cause these quantum effects to occur on other local objects, and the Nomai discovered, quite accidentally, that if a person standing on top of a quantum shard ceases observing or being observed for a moment, they too move with the quantum object. You've seen this for yourself. There's a quantum shard in the Observatory Museum and on a patch of forest known as the Quantum Grove on Timber Hearth, where Garrett made use of this phenomenon to craft a lovely quantum poem. Having recovered from their crash landing into the Hearthian system, the Nomai got back on task and built an eye signal locator on the Atoll Rock. Unfortunately, the detector was unable to locate the eye, so the Nomai built a second, more sophisticated locator on Brittle Hollow. This too failed. However, they were eventually able to land on the Quantum Moon, which they identified as a natural satellite of the eye. They had observed the moon in 5 separate orbits in the system, but also occasionally recorded it missing from any visible celestial body. They determined that its 6th location must be in orbit of the eye of the universe itself, explaining its quantum behaviour. As such, the Quantum Moon became a site of pilgrimage for the Nomai. Using what they had learned about the Wandering Moon, the Nomai determined the eye is in orbit around the Hearthian system's sun, and were able to get a vague estimate of its size and the approximate area it could inhabit, which is unfortunately enormous. Meanwhile, or thereabouts, the Nomai recreated an advanced warp technology which creates black and white holes, allowing travellers and objects to move seamlessly between them across vast distances. They then made the startling discovery that the time of arrival when warping is always 100,000th of a second earlier than the time of departure. Ergo, it appears that a traveller goes back in time whenever they use this warp technology. They learned that the more energy they provided to the warp core, the more exponentially long this negative time interval could be extended. This led to the creation of the Ash Twin project, both the location itself and a 3-part plan to locate the Eye of the Universe. The orbital probe cannon was built in orbit around Giant's Deep, designed similar to the Nomai gravity cannons. It would fire a probe in a random direction, with the data then sent back to the Ash Twin project. Ash Twin project itself contains linked Nomai masks and statues, just like the one that gave you the eye in the Hearthian Museum. One of these masks is linked to the orbital probe, so that the data can be streamed back in time to the cannon statue, and the experiment repeated as many times as needed. Several more masks and statues were created as failsafes, should their equipment malfunction. The statues are designed to link to the nearest living being upon activation, which is how you and Garrett became involved in the loop. The Nomai determined it would take around 22 minutes to locate the eye, using their orbital probe and mask statue technology to conduct the experiment immediately. Forgive me, the concept of time is a little murky here, rather than manually searching each possible orbit of the Sun across a huge area in real time. This was also beneficial because the force needed to send the probe was strong enough to break apart the launch cannon. Given the power needed to increase the negative time warp rate to 22 minutes is enormous, the Nomai decided to build a machine to trigger the Sun to go supernova, so the Ash Twin project could harness the energy that it produced. They called this the Sun Station. So, theoretically, the Sun Station receives the order to fire, causing the Sun to go supernova. Ash Twin project harnesses the energy the supernova produces, sending a request for the orbital probe to fire back in time 22 minutes. 22 minutes later, the Sun Station triggers the supernova again, sending the probe data back in time 22 minutes. Meaning, the Nomai collect the data without, from their perspective, any real time having passed, or the supernova occurring. The process would continue until the eye was located, upon which time the project would be shut down and normal time resume, with the location of the eye in the hands of the Nomai. Unfortunately, it didn't work. The Nomai were unable to affect the Sun in any meaningful way, probably a relief to a lot of them, since blowing up the Sun was a controversial strategy. Without a power source for Ash Twin project, the whole thing went on hold, while the Nomai investigated an icy comet that had recently entered the system, known as the Interloper. several Nomai took a shuttle to the interloper, where they discovered it contained a core of deadly exotic matter, at risk of rupturing as the comet drew closer to the sun. Before they were able to warn their fellow Nomai of the danger, the core ruptured, killing all Nomai in the system. The harmful patches of what Hearthians call ghost matter are the remnants of the interloper's ruptured core. That brings us to you. Over 250,000 years after the death of all Nomai in the Hearthian system, the sun reached the end of its natural lifespan and went supernova, powering and activating the Ash Twin project. The 9,318,054th probe launched by the orbital cannon, the very same one you saw when you woke up this morning, has located the eye of the universe, activating the remaining Nomai statues and trapping you and fellow traveller Gabbro in this time loop. The probe tracking module landed deep under the raging currents on Giant's Deep, where you find it, via a soothing jellyfish ride, and obtain the coordinates for the eye of the universe. You share your experiences with your time buddy Gabbro, whose unflinching calmness in the face of death and disaster is very reassuring. They also teach you how to meditate. On Dark Bramble, you find the long-missing feldspar, who's made camp in the bones of an anglerfish. This goes some way to explaining why you heard their harmonica through the Dark Bramble seed on Timber Hearth. They share their helpful discoveries and a few marshmallows with you, and you're happy to report back to your fellow Hearthians that Feldspar is alive and well, and actually not interested in being rescued anytime soon, rather enjoying the peace and quiet of this terrifying liminal space. You're just happy they're happy. While exploring Ash Twin, you catch up with Chert, who you see going through most of the stages of grief at their discovery that too many stars are dying out, that they must be much older than they thought, and that your star is next. You're pleased to end a loop by their side as they reach quiet acceptance of this unavoidable end. During your exploration of the Quantum Moon, an Escher-esque void of disappearing and appearing objects, whose appearance changes depending on which planet it's currently orbiting, you find a Nomai called Solanum, who was doing her pilgrimage at the time that the interloper's core ruptured. Since she was on the Quantum Moon at the time, she existed in a quantum superstate with it, in all 6 orbits at once, killing her along with the rest of the Nomai on 5 out of 6 of them. The Solanum in orbit of the Eye was far enough away from the core rupturing to be spared. You engage in the best form of chatter two beings separated by species and almost 300,000 years can muster, and while it takes a slightly somber tone as she appears to be aware that she exists in a strange quantum state of being not totally alive, it does feel nice to have a friend. You have another strange meeting with an unexpected being inside Ash Twin Project, yourself. For some reason, when, during one of the loops, you were inside Ash Twin Project when the sun exploded and powered it, you decided to jump inside the black hole it generated. While initially your journey appears the same as every previous loop, you find yourself already inside the project next time you visit. You give yourself a little sass, scream at the implication of it all, and move on. You now know the history of the Nomai in this system, and several other important things. The location of the Eye, the location of the Nomai vessel with which you can reach the Eye, and that the sun has reached the end of its finite lifespan. You cannot stop the sun from going supernova, but you can escape this loop and make the trip to the Eye of the universe that the Nomai never managed. So, you use the Nomai warp technology to find your way inside the protected core of the Ash Twin Project, and you remove the warp core, a long-distance travel device that utilises black and white holes, powering down Ash Twin Project and ending the perceived time loop. You take the warp core to Dark Bramble, using your knowledge of its spatial distortions to find the vessel. Here you find the vessel is still receiving signals from other Nomai clans. It seems this ship and its clan have become legendary in their disappearance, and that the other Nomai are aware of the impending destruction of many star systems. You're pleased to learn that the Nomai found a relatively stable system in which to reconnect and live out their days. You power the ship, enter the coordinates, and warp to the Eye of the universe. You exit the ship. You are on what appears to be a stormy purple planet, a celestial object older than the universe itself. You walk through a storm, quantum objects flitting in and out of your view as the lightning intermittently illuminates your surroundings. You reach the South Pole, where you find a large crater with quantum mass seeming to pour upwards from it. You jump in. When you're finally finished falling, you land in a quantum version of the observatory, the museum of your home planet, which has been kindly redecorated to log your discoveries. The Outer Wilds Ventures creation plaque has been updated to confirm that this is not just the end of the Hearthian system, but the end of the entire universe. You and the museum agree that amongst your wonderful discoveries, you will miss the giant anglerfish the least. The eye grants you a bird's eye view of the universe around you as the stars wink out of existence, one by one. You find yourself in an ancient glade, from which you continue to watch the stars die until you're left in total darkness. So, using all your newfound quantum knowledge, you build a campfire. After turning your back a couple of times, you're joined by a quantum version of Eska, one of the first Hearthian astronauts. They can hear music. You tune your signal scope to the Outer Wilds Ventures frequency, and you can hear it too. You follow the tune to Rybek's banjo, after which you find Rybek at the campsite. You follow their encouragement to locate the other travellers' instruments, Chert, Gabbro and Feldspar, and Solanum too, gathering everyone around the fire. You ask each of them to play. This is the end of everything. A few friends around a campfire, playing out the universe with a song. Everything is gone. Your community, your life, the future that 22 minutes ago seemed to extend on indefinitely, all blinked out of existence by the sheer force of inevitability. And while you feel a touch of sadness, your friends do not, and nor does their song. The final night fills with the music of acceptance and hope. You understand that the life and death of the Nomai was a microcosm of this greater ending. Their time in your system was short and difficult, but they loved and they laughed and explored, and everything they did contributed to a greater future, even if they never saw it. Your campfire is extinguished, and you get the privilege of helping collapse infinite possibility into a single reality, and see a new universe burst into existence. 14.3 billion years later, a future traveller lights a campfire.